Hello, welcome to DataSunrise demo. In this demo, we'll talk about sensitive data discovery feature, and DataSunrise has a lot of capabilities to help you to identify your sensitive items in your relational database instances, as well as an S3 buckets. So we'll split this down in two parts. First part will be dedicated to the identifying of sensitive information in the relational database instance. And another part will be dedicated to the identifying sensitive information in S3 buckets. Okay, how we can see where is located this sensitive data discovery? Well, we can go to the data discovery menu item in DataSunrise, and there is a periodic data discovery. Actually, under this menu item, you can find a list of configured tasks to identify your sensitive information. Well, let me show you one example. Well, in this example, I choose to use a single database instance. But if you want to search across several database instances, you can use this item, this check-in box, and select several database instances and configure it in DataSunrise. And this way you can search across all of them. And then how to analyze the data collected by DataSunrise. One of the options is to use generate reports check-in box, and there are two options. So we can generate CSV or PDF type, right? And you can also use uncompressed file, or you can use the compression using zip or gzip algorithm. Now let's scroll down and we'll see how we can identify the sensitive information by using DataSunrise. Well, in this case, we use single database instance configured in DataSunrise. We do not enable to collect any statistics regarding the process of the data discovery, and we are going to save our findings in the new sensitive objects object group. What does it mean? It means that we are going to collect all objects, or update if we run this task periodically. We'll update this information of the collected information of sensitive items in a specific object group. Then we can use this object group later on in our audit tasks to audit sensitive information. And again, this very interesting thing that if we want to make some kind of a cycle, automated one, DataSunrise can automatically run and can automatically identify sensitive information, and DataSunrise with the audit task can use this object group, in my case this is called new sensitive objects, to audit access to these objects. Well, this kind of automation can help you a lot in many ways. Now, let's talk about the strategy, how we can identify these sensitive items. One of the strategies that we encourage to use is to select just top rows from each table accessible by DataSunrise database user, which it's, well, reasonable, right? So we don't want to pull the entire table to DataSunrise and analyze the entire table. So we can choose just select top rows and analyze some of them. How many rows we are going to fetch? Well, we can find here it's 1000, but for sure you can use, let's say, 100 items. So it's usually sufficient to identify this as a sensitive information. And the strategy how to match different patterns in DataSunrise is to match only first filter. Well, you can use different ones like match all filters we provide to this task, but usually only first filter is sufficient to identify sensitive information. And this is again another very interesting item. This edit box should be discussed. This connected to the percentage of match. So if you want to be exact, then we have to go further to the 99%, but usually it doesn't match that exact match of the percentage. Right? But usually we do recommend to use 90% of the match to identify sensitive information and avoid misfiring or misidentifying this information. So DataSunrise is capable also to search in views. So this checking box is dedicated to that. But usually, if we have provided to DataSunrise way to access tables, well, we don't need to access views. Now, next part is dedicated to the objects themselves. We can include objects to search inside of them, like schemas or tables or databases, or we can skip some of objects, and this way we can simplify this work for our task for DataSunrise. Right? So we can skip definition of objects, like here, to exclude object from the search. So here we can put and select and compile the list of objects to which we want to avoid searching inside of these schemas, maybe, or databases. In my case, I've selected DataSunrise typical objects like DataSunrise OD, DataSunrise Dictionary, Postgres, which is default for PostgreSQL, and DataSunrise specific environment created for DataSunrise itself to provide specific masking solution. Okay. Now, all other objects will be accessed by DataSunrise for the purpose of to find sensitive information, discover such items. Now, also, these items dedicated to the explicit way to identify sensitive information, like if you want to search only in specific database and specific schema, we can use these items here, or we can leave it as it is. Now let's talk about the search settings subsection. This subsection is dedicated to help you be more specific with identifying sensitive information. One of the examples, we can use security standards here, right? So, and then we can select one or many security standards. Or if we want to be very specific, we can use information types, so-called, and then we will use different attributes from these information types. For example, if you want to search for personal information only, without taking into consideration any security standard like GDPR, for example, or PCI DSS, well, then it means that DataSunrise will try to find sensitive information in your columns and your S3 buckets if we're talking about S3 files. But now, in this example, we are going to use security standards, and I've selected 6 of them are provided, right? Also, there is a button customize, and you can customize the settings for every single task you want to configure, probably to search for sensitive information in DataSunrise. Well, there is another option to export the result of this sensitive information to discovery. There's an export option. One of them is to provide information as a file. We have mentioned that we can create a report, right? And that means DataSunrise will create this report, but how to deliver? So you can define here an external subscriber or an email recipient who will receive this file as an email attachment. There is another way to deliver or export this report file. So this file can be processed by the third-party tools that reside on the same machine that DataSunrise is installed. And you can put here the command how to call that tool or utility and provide DataSunrise a full path to process DataSunrise output, this report file. So there are a couple of ways to process even the output from DataSunrise provided you as a file. Right? Now, let's consider the other option called the startup frequency. Startup frequency means we can set a schedule. How often do you want to run such a periodic task? But in fact, you can use it manually, just to start a task and collect findings and process them. But if you want to do that on some period basis, then you can use, like, say, hourly, minutely, and so on. And first, you have to say to DataSunrise the start time, and then how often do you want to repeat, right? And so on. So DataSunrise uses some kind of internal scheduler to run this task. So to avoid blotting results, DataSunrise has a retention period for the results, so it can remove results older than, let's say, 1 month or 1 week and so on, right? And you can start this task you've described not only on the specific date and time, right? But also you can run it manually every time you come here, you open this page with the Start Now button. Now it will take some time to identify sensitive information in my PostgreSQL instance, right? Now let's continue. We see that this task is finished its operation, and we see that it took 16 seconds. And the status is here success with errors. It means that DataSunrise probably was not able to access some tables because that table was not accessible by DataSunrise with the user provided to DataSunrise, database user, right? So if you want to look inside of the results, there is a show button here and we can dive into. So by jumping into, we can see that the statistics here presented by databases, schemas, tables, and columns provide us with the information of how many items are found and how the layout here is agenda about what kind of information is found, like financial numbers, occupation, and so on. So if you want to work with the result, then we can scroll down and we see the result pane, right? And we see databases here, schemas, tables, columns presented for us. So if we want to work with specific database, so we consider that maybe our sensitive information in, let's say, test database, and want to work with this database, and we see that customers' passwords are identified. If we need to create, let's say, an audit, dynamic data masking task, or maybe some security task, we can check this particular item, and we can create audit security on masking rule right from this result pane of results, right? So right from there. And when we click this item, DataSunrise will take us to the configuration of the new rule for that particular feature, audit, masking, or security, right? Or it could be that there is a false positive, right? So maybe some ID is identified as for example, the passport, right, or the person ID. That could happen. One of the examples here. This ID is identified probably as a security number, right? Security, social security number, but we can exclude that item right from here by clicking Exclude from Next Discovery. And next time, DataSunrise will not show us this column as potentially sensitive information, right? The same is with another one. So they will be excluded this way. Now let's talk about the report DataSunrise can generate for us. Let's go back to the task itself. And we can notice here that DataSunrise excluded some objects from the next search by adding here ID and another ID in the list of objects excluded from the search. Now, how we can open the report generated by DataSunrise? So there is a report button. No, we can click it. Since we decided to generate a PDF report, not CSV, so it will be a predefined format. It will contain a database, schema, table, and a column with type name identified by DataSunrise. So this way we can work with a list of sensitive objects identified by DataSunrise. Okay, we see that it's not very difficult to define sensitive data discovery tasks and identify sensitive information in a database instance configured in DataSunrise. Now let's talk about sensitive data discovery in S3 buckets. So it's almost the same configured as the regular task, the search for sensitive information in DataSunrise under data discovery and periodic data discovery tasks. So when we are going to create a task to discover sensitive information in S3 buckets, And we need at least to have an account to access such S3 buckets. Now, here's an example configured, and this name is here, and we also can generate reports, but in this case I want to do that. On the search parameters, there are some additional options for S3 data discovery to collect some statistics, additional metrics. And like in case of tables and the relational databases, DataSunrise can use different strategies. One of them is to select top rows, like if we have some structured files like CSV files or JSON files or maybe XML files. We can select top rows or select all rows from each file and try to match this percentage of the sensitive information. And this is a number of analyzed rows, or actually lines we will receive from each file to analyze and match a sensitive pattern, right? And there are two ways actually on the task mode: the standard way and incremental way and randomized. The standard one is just to select randomly first amount of rows from each file and analyze. But if you want to increment, then probably we can see the difference between one file and another one. If the file already was analyzed, and this probably you have a huge CSV or XML or JSON file with some structured data inside, then DataSunrise can remember that file was already accessed some time ago, and if the file is not changed, then DataSunrise will not look inside of this file. This way you can incredibly speed up the process if we have many files with terabytes of data with incremental file search, right, in S3 buckets. Now, also there are several parameters how we can speed up the process. For example, the execution strategy here under multiprocess parameters is a single server, or it's possible to spread this task across several instances of DataSunrise if you have a cluster of DataSunrise nodes. And you want to select specific objects or explicitly tell DataSunrise what kind of bucket we're going to search, because probably in this bucket we can have millions of files and folders. So I've specified here my single S3 bucket, and also we can use different criteria for the extension, like for example CSV, XML, and so on if we have such. And also, like in case of the structured database instances, we can exclude objects from the search the same way, right? But the patterns for the names, like star dot, for example, PDF, for example, we don't want to look inside of such files. And the last thing here is similar to the way how we can search information in the structured databases, like the search settings, the security standards and information types. It's exactly the same thing. So exactly the same is the file retention period, task start, job, and result. So let's start it. It will take some time to search across all the data that we have in my buckets. Okay, that took just 4 seconds, not many information in there. Let's look inside of the result. So we see how many files and columns processed, what information type matched, and we see here the sensitive information that matched. So also we can use the same way, like for example, we can set an audit or the masking. If DataSunrise is running in the proxy mode, and we can mask the data for some users who access this information. And also we can use the same filtering to search for a specific column or file or information type and attribute. So this way you can use DataSunrise to discover sensitive information in so-called structured databases like relational databases, or if you need to search for information and sensitive type information in S3 buckets, then you can use DataSunrise to discover such information in structured files saved in S3 buckets. Okay, so DataSunrise has a lot of features to help you in identifying sensitive information on a daily basis. Thank you for watching.